Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to week 8. Yes, week 8 of the STAR Center's Employee Engagement Learning Collaborative. Today, we are going to be diving into the topic of engaging a diverse workforce. I'm Suzanne Spear. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at ACU. And just as a reminder, I am joined as staff at the STAR Center by Mariah Blake, who is our program manager. And as always, if you have any technical questions, feel free to get in touch with either of us at our email address that's listed there. We are once again joined today by Lisa Mouscher, the CEO and lead consultant at Sogence Training and Consulting, and she is going to be taking us on our journey today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne, and welcome, everyone. And today we are talking about engaging a diverse workforce. And you might think, didn't we talk about engaging our folks in the very first week? And indeed we did. But a diverse workforce throws in all sorts of challenges and makes our life more interesting and more wonderful. And so we're going to be talking about how do you engage all the diverse people on your team. When we talked that first week about what is employee engagement, I read one of the very many definitions that you can find online, and I like this one. The feeling of passion, energy, and commitment toward their work that motivates employees to fully invest themselves to successfully achieve their goals and to further the achievement of the organization's mission. So that's what we're trying to do with our entire workforce. Our entire very diverse group of people that work for us. So why are we talking about this today? Well, my understanding is you work with an incredibly diverse workforce, and diversity comes in many different ways. But I also want to say before we get deep into this, that we're going to be talking in a lot of generalizations. It's really important to remember that although we are talking about specific groups of people, we work with individuals. And so everything I say may apply to a group, but it may well not apply to the individuals within that group. So we always want to check in with that person to see specifically what it is that they want and they need in order to be engaged. Diversity encompasses far more than we think it does when we generally talk about it. The first things on this list we all know. Age and race and gender and ethnicity, we hear those all the time. Marital status, education level, that's not usually thrown in there. Religion, sexual orientation, color, disability, and here are some that we may not usually think about. Parenting status, communication style, political beliefs, personality type, all of those things are part of our diverse workforce. And they're part of what makes our team wonderful and balanced. And again, it's also part of what makes our job as managers a little tougher because, again, we have individuals working for us and we want to engage that individual in the way they want to be engaged. So take a second before we move on, look at this list because I know I'm missing some things, and think about other diversity that's not on this list that maybe you have in your team now or you have in the past. If you don't have a pen and paper with you, you'll probably want that. So if you can just take a second and grab that, you're going to be using it throughout. Okay. When you're working with a diverse workforce, it's really important to be thinking about what is my implicit or my unconscious bias? And I was just with a group of people and I said, so everybody has unconscious biases. Everybody has some ism, some prejudice. And someone raised their hand and said, you know, I've worked on it for years and I don't. And everyone laughed because, of course, we all have some implicit, some unconscious bias. And really what it's about is figuring out where they are and what we're going to do about it. Implicit bias is the attitude or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions without our general conscious awareness of their influence. So those are things that lurk in the back of our heads and influence the way we act and the decisions that we make. Implicit bias can affect our decisions, our actions, and our demeanor in many ways. So things that I could think of: who we hire and who we promote, the way we train and who we give opportunities to, our social interactions, who are we comfortable with? Often they're the people that are most like us. Who do we assign tasks to? Who do we solicit information from and then act on that input? Who do we, when we're scheduling, who do we give the better shifts to? And then when people make requests for time off, whose do we approve first? Our implicit biases, our unconscious biases affect all of those things. So before we move on, take a second and think about, where might those implicit biases lurk for you? And just write it down. It's just for you. The challenge is to acknowledge your bias, because everybody's got them, and the biases around you, and to work to consciously counteract them. And as a manager, it's not just your job to counteract your own, which would be enough. It's also your job to counteract those of all the people around you, because your job obviously is to help engage everyone and to create a safe environment for everyone. A great test that I highly encourage people to do is online. It's called the Harvard Implicit Association Test, or the IAT, and you can just Google it. It'll come right up. It's free, and it helps you identify some of your blind spots. Some areas where you might have an ism, you might have, and when I say ism, area of prejudice or racism or sexism or ageism, and there's hundreds of them. I saw a list once. There's far more than we can imagine. And the IAT can help you identify where yours might lurk so that you can be conscious of it and try to counteract it. There are three most common types of implicit bias. One is the affinity bias, the tendency to prefer individuals who are similar to ourselves. One is the confirmation bias, the tendency to seek information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs and to ignore people or information that don't confirm our pre-existing beliefs. And I don't know about you, but I know that certainly I've been someone who's done that. And perception bias, the tendency to form stereotypes and assumptions about certain groups that prevent objectivity and do not distinguish individuals from their group membership. So we lump people together and say, oh, because they're part of this group, they would like to do, or they would not like to do, or they're going to act in this way. And of course, what we know is that's not true, but those things lurk within us, and we always want to be aware of them. It's also your job, as I mentioned, to deal with some microaggressions, the things that are happening within your department that are unintentional slights that may be perceived as offensive. They can damage relationships, and they hugely damage engagement. Microaggressions can be as simple as someone talking about someone else's disability, their sexual orientation, their religious beliefs, simple teasing or making jokes. And people will say, it was harmless. But the question is it harmless? And many, many times, people are laughing along, the people who are the butt of the joke. But the question is, what's that doing to their engagement? Every day that any diversity-related slight goes unaddressed, even for a short period of time, is an opening for disengagement, for reduced productivity, and a step towards the door. And I know that your goal, obviously, is to increase engagement, to have a really happy team, and to have people who are productive and satisfied. So you want to jump on those microaggressions quickly, call somebody into your office and say, I just heard this happening, and, I'd like to talk about it. So this is a lot. Where do you start? By taking an honest look at your own biases. Where are your blind spots, your stereotypes, your prejudices, your discomfort, your assumptions? And when I took that IAT, there were things that, I had never even really thought about. So that's a great place to start. I'd like you to take a second and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out. And I would like you to just follow along with me. Envision the situations that I'm about to talk about. Put yourself in this position. Keep your eyes closed. Picture that you are extremely outgoing and outspoken. A quiet, understated employee applies for a lead position. So they're the opposite of your natural personality. What's your first thought? Another situation. Your Spanish-speaking employees speak Spanish when they're having non-work related conversations. You don't speak a word of Spanish. What's your first thought? You have a broad range of diversity in your team. Who do you go to for low-level or undesirable tasks? Who do you go to for the more critical tasks? How do you make those choices? Are you sure that the reasons are backed up by evidence? And that's what you constantly want to be asking yourself. Are you creating a self-fulfilling prophecy? Another situation. You're grooming people to move up in your department. Who do you spend the most time with as you're grooming folks to move up? Why? What assumptions, stereotypes, and other biases might be involved in those decisions? Maybe some, maybe none, but you just want to always be on top of it. Imagine I'm describing a person in my department that you don't know. I talk in glowing terms about their willingness to help, their proactive nature, and their overwhelming and incredible work ethic. Who are you picturing? What's their race? What's their gender? What's their age? You have an employee in the process of transitioning from male to female. That employee applies for a supervisory position. What's your first thought? You hear someone telling a joke about an ethnic group that's represented in your team. The people in that group, in that ethnic group that's being laughed at, seem to be laughing along. What do you do? The only reason I'm reading these are to help us start to get in touch with where are areas of blindness. We need to be engaging everyone on our team, and we first need to be really aware of what we're doing. I found some of those, I made some of those up. I know that sometimes people will take things like this, situations like this, to their management meetings and do a little exercise at the management meeting. So if you want to spread this throughout your organization, take this to your management meeting and get people thinking about it, that would be wonderful. Awareness is only the first step, though. It's your actions that count. So now what do we do? Well, you can start by asking yourself 4 questions. How can I help this individual that I'm working with, this person on my team, feel valued? Have I done my research to gain a general understanding about this particular person's area of diversity? Have I asked appropriate questions to understand the specific individual's needs? And probably as important or more important, how can I lead by example? And of course, a wonderful thing you can ask is, how would you prefer that we do this? How would you prefer that I communicate with you? How would you prefer that I approach you? And you may have some information like maybe you have someone from India on your team. And you know that there are people within India that are vegetarians, but of course there are lots of people in India that are not. And so rather than assuming that someone's a vegetarian and ordering a vegetarian meal, you would ask them. And you might say, I know that there are some people in India that are vegetarians. I wasn't sure if you were one of them, and I wanted to order you a vegetarian meal if, in fact, you would like that. Or you might simply say, and this is a much easier way to do it, is anyone vegetarian? Does anyone have a special need? Please email me if you do. And that way they don't have to identify themselves in front of other people, and you know. And then, of course, you want to act on the insights that you get. So you're going to ask those 4 questions, you're going to get insights, and then you want to treat each individual in the way that's the easiest and the best for them. It can be challenging, but never impossible. And we have to start somewhere, so why not with you? Here's what I often hear. Lisa, I really can't do this. My organization's not focused on it. Lisa, I really can't do this. My manager is the worst. So how can I be doing this if my manager doesn't? we can make our departments the example departments and be as culturally sensitive as we can and have the most engaged department in the health center. Here are some behaviors that can cause diverse employees to disengage. And we've already talked about diversity is endless. It encompasses so much. These are things that happen all the time. Holiday parties that ignore or marginalize entire groups of people. I've been to holiday parties. I happen to be Jewish. I've been to holiday parties where everything was green and red and everything was Christmas. And during the holiday season, I asked if we could put up a menorah. And that's just a small thing, and I shouldn't have to ask. And so what are the various religions that might be represented in your organization? How can you make sure that all the holidays are celebrated and everyone is represented equally during that holiday period? Other ways that we cause disengagement, insensitive or non-inclusive pronouns. Many health centers are now having people, they're saying, you certainly don't have to do this, but you might want to put in your email signature the pronoun that you prefer. Him, her, she, he, right? They. So what pronoun do you prefer? He, she, they, and then we need to respect it. And I know some people have difficulty with that and their beliefs get involved, but if we're talking about respecting the people in front of us and trying to engage them, we want to find out what makes them most comfortable and their engagement will increase. Other things that can be disengaging, jokes or insensitive comments, inappropriate or unnecessary references to a person's race, religion, age, disability, or other status. Any assumptions we have about someone's interests, their abilities, their availability, their trainability. Training that it moves too fast for someone's ability, especially if they're not real technical and it's technical training, or political comments. And I think often within many organizations, and I've certainly seen this in health centers and probably every organization I work with, people assume that the people around them have the same political beliefs that they do. And we know that's often not true. So it can be very disengaging if we allow conversations about politics in our arena. And it's really easy to say, I know that this is an interesting time in the country, and in order to make sure that we're respecting everyone's beliefs, let's stay away from politics at work. You may not be able to change the whole organization, but the question becomes, what can you do at an organizational level? Because as I said, you could be the team, what could you do at a department level? You could be the team that leads your whole organization. You could make all the difference. So take a minute, I'm going to read some, but take a minute and think, what do you think you could do at a department level to start really being culturally sensitive, diversity sensitive in all the different areas of your diversity, and bring the engagement up within your department? What are some specific things you could do? Just write a few down. Here are some that I thought of, and you've probably come up with these and more. Provide training opportunities to everyone, regardless of what you think about their abilities or how old they are or any of the things that might get in the way of you thinking about training this person. If you put all of that aside and provide training opportunities to everyone, engagement goes up, and who knows what will come out of that. Use CCSAs. We certainly have talked a lot about CCSAs. Use those one-on-one meetings to understand each person's career goals, their strengths, their interests, and then tailor training to meet that individual's strengths and interests. Ask for, listen to, and act on ideas given by all of your employees, not just a select few. Provide an explanation when input is not acted on. That's huge. Think of that list of the Gallup list that we talked about the very first week of things that engage people. If they give input, it's never acted on and they don't know why, they're a step towards the door. So you always want to provide an explanation. Create teams and rotate who gets assigned. Make sure that everyone gets an opportunity. Utilize mentoring. Provide opportunities for growth and involvement for all. And ask people which opportunity and in what area does that individual want to grow their skills? Not if they want an opportunity, but which opportunity. What area do they want to grow their skills in so that you can grow your own within your health center? People often ask me to talk about generational diversity. I know you're working with a really wide range of generations, and it can be challenging. And again, we're talking about individuals, not groups, but there are some tips that often apply to a large number of people within that group. And then you're going to want to find out if, in fact, that works for this particular person or they want to be engaged in a different way. For the first time in history, we have 5 generations in the workplace: traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. 5 generations that you're working to meet their needs. Here's some tips. People are living longer and they're working longer. We have traditionalists in our workplace. Traditionalists are born before 1945. So these are people that are 73, 74 or older. Some tips to consider. Introduce new technology at their pace, not yours. So not assuming that their pace is going to be slower, because for some, they may be off and running. For others, technology came late in their lives. We don't want to make assumptions. We want to find out what's their comfortable pace and introduce the technology at a pace that's comfortable for them. Give the traditionalists meaningful work. These are people who have had long careers. They want to make a difference. They may want part-time hours. That may be appreciated. And they really often prefer to conduct communication primarily in person or by phone. That said, you may have somebody who's a traditionalist who texts a million miles an hour. So you want to find out rather than assume. The next group are the baby boomers. They're born between 1945 and 1965. Some of these folks are starting to retire, but many have many good years left in the workplace. And they're part of our team, and they're a great part of our team. So engagement tips to consider. Maybe ask them to mentor or train others. Again, they've got careers behind them, lots of good experience and great skills. And many baby boomers really relish the opportunity to pass those skills on to those who are on their way up. Ask for their input, discussion, and collaboration. They want to share, and they've got often wonderful ideas to provide. They tend to be email savvy, but they may prefer phone and in-person interactions, and they may prefer technology that's tried and true. They enjoy goal-driven work and rising to challenges, so don't shy away from giving those challenges. I've worked with groups where all the challenges are going to the millennials. These baby boomers are ready and waiting for the challenge to come their way. And they may appreciate flexibility in their scheduling. Next is Generation X, born 1966 to 1985. I call these the middle children. They're quietly getting the work done behind the scenes. They're in the middle of all of the generations. Engagement tips to consider: providing independence, flexibility, and work-life balance wherever possible. Incorporating lots of recognition and direct constructive feedback. And by the way, recognition is important for everybody. And they may prefer clear email chains rather than meetings. Now we're getting into the group where they grew up more with technology, and email is their comfort level, and meetings may be seen as a waste of time. Doesn't mean you're not going to have some meetings, but you may want to find other ways to communicate as well. And then you have the millennials, and my guess is you have lots of millennials. They're the dominant generation in the workplace. They're born between 1985 and 1997. And engagement tips to consider for them: providing independence and flexibility because they want it. Incorporating ongoing and immediate recognition for all that they do. Remember, these are the folks that received ribbons for participating. They received prizes for effort. Not saying that that's good or bad. It's simply what they grew up with as they went to school, and for many of them as they were raised. So we want to make sure that we're remembering that, because for them, that's simply part of the workday, incorporating ongoing and immediate recognition for all that they do, and they're going to be far more engaged. Work hard to connect them to the mission. Making a difference is key. The more technology, the better. Technology projects are motivating to them, and communicate by text, email when necessary, communicate by phone and voicemail as little as possible. And again, everybody's an individual. You want to check out these assumptions and see if they're true. And then you've got Gen Z. And Gen Z is the youngest in the workplace. They have a strong entrepreneurial drive. They're seeking economic stability. Engagement tips to consider for them: provide opportunities to utilize their creativity and entrepreneurial and tech-savvy characteristics. These folks were born 1997 to present. They're young. They are tech-savvy. I often find when I'm working with a primary care association or with a community health center, they'll say, you know, don't worry about about all the graphics, Lisa. We're going to give this to our millennials or our Gen Zs because they grew up with all the graphics packages and they can make it beautiful. So provide opportunities for them to use those skills, incorporate ongoing development and training, and communicate primarily through text and email. Check it out with each individual. I want to talk a little bit, now that we've talked about the generations, about stay interviews. We all know about exit interviews. Problem with exit interviews is we don't have an opportunity to engage that person anymore. They're gone or they're on their way out the door. We want to find out, why is this person staying with us? Are they thinking about leaving? And do I have the opportunity to keep them? Turnover causes countless negative effects. We talked about that when we talked about behavioral interviewing. And stay interviews can significantly strengthen both engagement and retention. Stay interviews can really help you figure out, why do your employees want to keep working for you and why might they want to leave? Really, really wonderful information. My little caveat in here, please talk to human resources and your manager to gain their buy-in and their guidance before you implement stay interviews. It's possible that things could be said, it could take you into areas that could get your organization into some legal hot water. So you want to make sure that human resources is comfortable with the questions you're asking and that you've gotten some coaching how to handle situations that might arise. That said, once you get that buy-in, you can go online and find some wonderful questions for stay interviews. You want to ask structured questions, ask them of everyone, and ask them only in one-on-one discussions. These are not group discussions. Keys: talk little, listen a lot, be encouraging, and be really open to feedback. And that can be one of the hardest things in the whole world, because you may be hearing some tough things about you or your management style. One of the questions that you can ask is, if you were managing you, what would you do differently than I'm doing? And you can get some great insight. And again, search the internet for great questions. We will post some out on the discussion board and under the resources so that it's going to be a link to a website I found that had 20 wonderful questions for stay interviews. So you can really make sure that you're engaging people and getting them at a time before they're ready to walk out the door. And then act on the information that you get from those stay interviews. As we know from all the surveys we do, if we do the survey and then we don't do anything with the information, we disengage people. We want to act on what we learn quickly to engage, motivate, and retain our employees. And of course, I can't talk about engaging diverse employees, engaging any employees, without talking about recognition. You want to build individual recognition systems. Ask each of your employees how they prefer to be recognized. Have a recognition plan for each of your employees and then use it. By the way, you probably know this, recognition is one of the key ways to keep anyone engaged at your workplace. Some final thoughts. Here are some questions to ask yourself. Do I truly understand what's important to this individual? Do I make assumptions about this person based on stereotypes and unconscious biases? Am I a better manager to some than to others? If so, why? And what can I do to improve? Do I encourage and include everyone's input when making decisions? Or do I focus on people that I like, feel comfortable with, or are more like me? Are there equal opportunities for growth and development for everyone in this department? Is access to those opportunities equally available to people with differing styles, preferences, personalities, and cultures? And do I encourage my employees who need encouragement to fully participate, or do they get lost in the weeds? Do I even know who those people are? Do I understand the value each uniquely different person on my team can bring? Do I do what I can to bring their value forward? And last but not least, am I meeting with each member of my team regularly to make sure that I have the information that I need? Am I using that information effectively? Questions for each of us to be asking ourselves on a regular basis. On the next slide, you see those factors that are important in achieving employee engagement. Again, you saw those in the first week. You want to keep those in mind, regardless of who you're working with, regardless of their diversity, because that is so key to making sure that we're applying the skills that we have equally to all and letting them apply their skills and their talents equally to the opportunities available at our workplace. I want to end today with a great quote by Leah Georges. Create unique and specific relationships with each person you have the opportunity to work with. Make no assumptions about their system, motivation for coming, make no assumptions about their value system, motivation for coming to work each day, or professional or personal goals. A leader who encourages these one-on-one relationships and a focus on each employee's unique needs and values creates an environment for high-performing teams to thrive. And that's what it's all about. So my question for you is, what's your next step? How are you going to start? Take a second, think about that. When we hang up, what are you going to do to make sure you're engaging all of the diversity within your workforce? Last but not least, next steps, the discussion board questions. Let us know about one idea discussed in this webinar that you're currently doing or have done in the past. Every effort is different. What are the details of what you're doing? Please go out to the discussion board and let us know. And then if other people have questions, please ask them and let's get the conversation going. And then pick one idea that we talked about in the webinar that you would like to implement that you're not doing now. And talk about the fact that you want to implement that and how you would go about doing it. This is easy homework this week. The homework is go out to the discussion board and answer the questions. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week.